Hello, today is July 7th, 2016. My name is Giancarlo Stefanuti. We are in Detroit, Michigan, and this interview is for the Detroit 67 Oral History Project. And I'm here with Mary T. Allor. Thank you for sitting down with me today.
Thank you very much.
Can you first start by telling me where and when were you born?
Yeah, I was born May 1st, 1946 in Highland Park, Michigan.
Okay. What did your parents do when
My
you were a
dad
child?
was the chief of radiology at Detroit Osteopathic Hospital in Highland Park. My mother was a nurse but didn't work very much at all.
Okay.
So she was more of a homemaker.
Do you have any siblings?
My oldest sister is 13 years older than me, went off and became a nun, so she was off in the convent when all this happened, and she's not a nun anymore. And then I had a brother who was 10 years older than me, and he's passed away. And then I have a brother who's 7 years older than myself, and he's alive and well out in Metamora. And then
Okay.
me.
Awesome. So what was your childhood like in Highland Park?
Well, I grew up in Detroit.
Oh, you grew up in Detroit.
Even
okay.
though we grew up in 6 Mile and Livernois and Jesu Parish, I think they call it University District now.
Okay, so when did you move to Detroit then, from Highland Park?
I was born in Highland Park.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
At that time, they were, I think, pretty much interchangeable.
Right,
I think
right.
Highland Park was
Sorry.
within the
Yeah, I just got
confines of
confused.
Detroit. So I went to Academy of the Sacred Heart that was down on Woodrow Wilson and John R. Until they moved out to Bloomfield Hills. I was in 5th grade, I think, 6th grade. So my early primary years, I don't, let's see, what can I say? I don't remember a whole lot. I was in school most of the time.
Right.
Maybe minutes too. We had a woman who worked for us. Her name was Jimmy Goldsby, and she was black. And Jimmy came to work for us when I was 5, and so she, I didn't see any racial differences. She was like a mother to me. My mom was real sick when I was growing up, so Jimmy raised me. And then we had another lady who worked for us, Bertha Little, and then we lived across the street from Jack Adams, the general manager of the Detroit Red Wings.
Okay.
And they had a houseboy, and his name was Joseph Adams. And so there was really only the 3 black people that I knew, so I didn't know that there was any. I was pretty naive. I didn't realize that there was any racial conflicts, or I was pretty isolated from them. Then when Sacred Heart moved out to Bloomfield Hills, I was even less in contact with black people. So I just didn't have any concept of the problems.
Okay. So your school was also not too racially integrated?
No, not at all then. Not at all then. I graduated in 1964.
Okay.
Then I went away for a year, and then I came back and graduated from Mercy College that used to be on Outer Drive and Southfield. And I just don't remember I don't remember a lot of, I know there were Hispanic students. I'm sure there were black students, but I don't remember lots of them. I lived in the dorm. When I graduated, I moved back home for a while, and then I got an apartment on Greenfield and Greenfield and Finkel, I think it was. And I really didn't realize, I was just naive. I guess I just didn't see the racial problems coming up. So,
Okay.
okay.
And that was in the early 60s?
Yeah, I graduated in 1968 from Mercy College.
Okay.
Became a nurse. I'll tell you that part after the riots, because that kind of played in then. So.
Okay.
So
then we can move towards the riots.
Okay.
Where were you when you first heard about it?
Well, I was with him. I was 21. I had met Jim like 2 months before. I was like starry-eyed and in love. And we went to the zoo that day. We didn't have the radio on, of course. I actually wrote about this. So we went to the zoo all day, no radio. I knew nothing about the violence. That was a Sunday, and I knew nothing about the violence the night before. I was just not aware of it at all. And so after we went to the zoo and had a wonderful time, and then my mother was in the hospital at Detroit Osteopathic. So we were driving down to see her, and we were driving down, I think it was 3rd Avenue. And it was just weird. There was no traffic. We didn't have the radio on. It's like young and in love and oblivious to the world. So we drove down to the hospital. Jim had, how old was your Mustang? What year was your Mustang?
65.
Yeah, 65 Mustang, and got to the hospital, and I was a regular there, seeing my dad or whatever. So we drove into the Circle Drive, and there was no cars there, and that was the first tip-off, that there was no cars on 3rd, and there was no cars in Circle Drive, and then we walked into the hospital, and there were National Guard all over the place, and I was just like totally stunned. Frightened, wondered what was going on. And I don't remember much about that day except for that we had to stay at the hospital. And I think I slept on an x-ray table, and my brother was an intern, I think, at the time. And so I think my husband and my brother, I don't know, went up on the roof and saw us shooting. But I was like, I don't remember very much. All I remember was that I was really frightened. The next morning, because we still didn't really know what was going on, it was like really strange, and we were right in the heart of it, being in Highland Park. So the next morning, I remember a police ambulance came and took my mom and my brother and myself home. Jim drove home. He lived in Royal Oak, and I remember the next few days he would bring us like bread and milk, and because we couldn't go to any stores or anything. We lived in a colonial home that was 1 block east of Livernois and north of 6 Mile, and on Warrington. And we had upstairs, my bedroom had a porch outside of it, and I had always loved to go out and sit there and look at the stars and whatever. And so I remember during the riots, I remember going out on the porch in the my upstairs bedroom, and I would, I was like, it was such a stupid thing to do. But I remember I could see the shooting up and down Livernois, and I could see military trucks, going up and down, and it was like it was unreal to me. National Guard, police, ambulances, or not ambulances, but sirens all the time. And I remember I just felt really terrified, really confused, and I felt like Anne Frank. It was like, really weird. It was like, what's happening? And I just felt totally frightened and confused. Jimmy Goldsby, I think I mentioned before, she was like our house help. She was like a nanny to me, and she lived on Ewald Circle and Livernois, near Davison and Livernois. And I remember my dad, she'd take the bus to our house, but my dad would drive her home at night, and my dad had this white Cadillac convertible with a red interior. He usually had the top down, and I just remember being like really frightened for both of them. It was like so scary. A lot of my memories of those days are blurred, but I do remember the sense of terror. Jerry Kavanaugh was the mayor, and he lived right across the street from us.
Oh, wow.
And I don't recall talking to him about it, but so I guess that was my experience of it.
How was your neighborhood reacting to it?
My family didn't communicate a lot with other neighbors, so I don't know. I don't know. I felt real isolated in the whole thing. I don't remember any violence on our street. I know there were no black people that lived in the neighborhood, so I can't say. I don't recall.
Okay. Were you ever worried that the, gunshots or the violence that you saw would come towards your neighborhood?
Mm-hmm. Terrified.
Wow.
I was terrified. I mean, I could see it right on the street, like as far as that building goes. But I was like in disbelief and fascinated, but I was also like aware that somebody was getting injured and killed out there. And like to this day, I can't stand violence. I can't stand gunshots. I can't stand, just the terror of all of that was awful.
Moving towards the few years after the riot, did you notice any changes in the city?
Yeah, I graduated in 1968 from Mercy College, and I became a visiting nurse, of course. And my area was like Olympia Stadium and up and down Grand River. And I was 22, naive, loved the excitement of the whole thing. I had worked as a clerk for the VNA all through college, and so I was very excited to be actually taking care of the people that used to call in for referrals. So anyhow, And I don't remember feeling afraid. I don't even remember feeling cautioned to feel afraid. My supervisor was black. I loved her. She was wonderful. But I remember, one instance, and I actually thought of their names today, it was Roy and Emma McNulty, and they lived someplace off of Grand River, and they were an elderly couple, and I used to come like once a week and, do her medications and give her a bath and change her dressings and stuff. And I remember this, and I always came the same time, the same day every week, and I remember this, one day I was in there giving her a bath and had her in the bathtub, and her nephew, I believe it was, came running upstairs to their apartment and said, "Come on, nurse, just follow me." I remember Roy saying, "No, go ahead and go." And so I got my little black bag and went down to my little yellow Mustang, and there was this nephew and then I guess a friend of his, and one car was in front of me and one car was behind me, and they literally led me back down Grand River and to Myers, where my office was. And then they turned off and waved me off and stuff. I still didn't know what was going on when I got back in the office. We didn't have cell phones. And so my supervisor was, really upset about it. I guess the school across the street, there had been a racial incident where they were smashing out the windows and, hitting any white people that were in the area. And this young nephew knew that because I had such a regular schedule coming there. And he got me out of there, safely.
Oh, wow.
So, as far as other changes, I know a lot of houses in our neighborhood went up for sale. Those changes happened. My parents still didn't move until 1970. We were married in 70, and my parents moved right after that, right after our wedding. I just know I think my dad was more frightened. He'd still drive around in his little Cadillac with his bald head up and down, Curtis. And I just remember, I don't know if he told me that there was some taunting and yelling at him, but I know he didn't feel safe.
So
I couldn't believe the whole thing. I just couldn't believe it.
So you generally felt less safe in the city than you did before?
Definitely.
Did you yourself ever consider leaving Detroit?
Well, when we got married, Jim was from Royal Oak, so we did move to Royal Oak.
Oh, okay.
By then, my parents had sold their home. I didn't really have, most of the friends that I had already moved, gotten married or moved.
Okay. How do you see Detroit today with all this in mind? Do you think that Detroit has improved since then, or has it stayed the same?
I think it really went downhill, drastically. I know where I lived, we used to shop at B. Siegel on the Avenue of Fashion. I mean, all of that, I can't believe how it's changed. And I think I saw, I started to have some fear working as a visiting nurse because, a lot of the areas that I went to in that year and later years, I was doing home care for another agency, and when I had gone to give a man his insulin, it was over on 7 Mile in Evergreen, I think. And when I came down from giving him his insulin, which was like 8:30 in the morning, there had been a drug bust of a car parked right in front of myself, and they had found a dead body in the car, in the trunk of the car. Here my car was parked right behind it. So I just remember, I'm kind of slow to catch on. I thought, this is dangerous. I can't do this anymore. I'm happy to see what's happening in Detroit now. I'm really, I don't think I'll ever live in Detroit. We live in Plymouth now, but it's just being so revitalized that I think it's really exciting. I'm concerned about the homeless. Where are they going to put those people? It's like in order to do the developing that they're doing, what about the pockets of homelessness, though? You can't just pick those people up and ship them out. Right. So, and I don't know a solution to it.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I taught at U of M. I retired from University of Michigan. I taught nursing there and did a lot of multicultural teaching. And I've often wondered, where did my passion for that come from? And I think part of it was from Jimmy, that she just was so good to me. And but part of it, I think, was living in Detroit and living in the riots, living through the riots. So guess that's everything I could think of.
Okay. Well, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Yeah, thank you very much.